Hello, hello, hello. Let me check in with chapter 6 of Stnr by John Williams. This chapter opens with the death of Archer Stone. Archer Sloane. Um, uh, you know, had been in decline and has what I don't know, maybe considered just, it's a sad or ironic death of he goes into his office on Friday, and isn't his body isn't discovered until the following Monday by a janitor. And yeah, yeah. Stoner, he doesn't. Sloane does not have any family, and Stoner is the only one who cries at his funeral because there was no one else there. And you know, the coroner announced heart failure as the cause of death, but William Stoner always felt that in a moment of anger and despair, Sloane had willed his heart to cease, as if in a last mute gesture of love and contempt for a world that had betrayed him so profoundly that he could not endure it. And it's um, a part of that does capture um, Archer Archer Sloane and his his feelings of, I guess, betrayal, just of his decline. Like, it's like my body is betraying me, the world is betraying me. There's just also the thing of his life started with the Civil War, and he lost so many students in the First World War. Um, so there's all that. Um, going forward, we have Emily. Emily decides that she wants a house, and it's like she wants a house because she can't stand being the sight and smell of her husband and her child. She just wants to be apart from them more. And so, without discussing it with William, she gets a loan from her father for $6,000, which he's like, "You can't afford this. This is like, I'm just barely saving money at the moment. This is going to be like half my salary." Thing, and he was planning on, like, actually maybe trying to do more writing in the summer, but now it's like she basically lays down the law, the ultimatum. And so he ends up putting aside his writing and doing that, um, you know, being kind of shackled to this big, what sounds like a kind of a big, gorgeous old house, but you know, it's like, yeah, yeah. And then we get the introduction of what I assume is going to be a fairly major character in this book, Hollis N. Lomax, as the new professor who replaces Archer Sloane. And just like, it's one of these things of, he has the dramatic entrance. It's like the author is telling you, here is the guy, because he doesn't show up through all the kind of the prep work. He doesn't show up at the registration. And it's like, finally, like, all the teachers, I guess, are together at this thing. And, Gordon Finch is called for silence, and then the door creaks open. And he had come through the door and closed it and advanced a few steps beyond the threshold where he now stood. He was a man barely over 5 feet in height, and his body was grotesquely misshapen. A small hump raised his left shoulder to his neck, and his left arm hung laxly at his side. His upper body was heavy and curved, so that he appeared to be always struggling for balance. His legs were thin, and he walked with a hitch in his stiff right leg. For several moments he stood with his blond head bent downwards, as if he were inspecting his highly polished black shoes and a sharp crease of his black trousers. Then he lifted his head and shot his right arm out, exposing a white length of cuff with gold links. There was a cigarette in his long, pale fingers. He took a deep drag, inhaled, and expelled the smoke in a thin stream. And then they could see his face. It was the face of a matinee idol, long and thin and mobile. It was nevertheless strongly featured. His forehead was high and narrow, with heavy veins, and his thick waving hair, the color of ripe wheat, swept back from it in a somewhat theatrical pompadour. He dropped his cigarette on the floor, ground it beneath his soul, and spoke. I am Lomax. He paused, his voice rich and deep, articulating his words precisely with dramatic resonance. I hope I have not disrupted your meeting. It's like it's really a really kind of really striking character introduction. First, you get kind of like misshapen. It's like almost thinking, oh my, it's like kind of like Quasimodo kind of thing. But then you get matinee idol face and pompadour hair and this rich, resonant voice. Um, and Stoner quickly, like he's a fairly haughty kind of guy. He doesn't really socialize with the other teachers. He turns down all his things. He's popular with his students. Stoner quickly seems to connect him with Dave Masters, his friend from the early days at the college, who went off and was killed immediately upon arrival in France in World War One. And they when it comes time to do the invites for kind of the house welcoming for the new house, which again, Edith has just thrown herself in, and to the point of exhaustion, to the point of hysteria. They keep on using that word hysteria. We'll have to, that's a word that gets used, and it's a word used against women all the time. But he actually comes to the party, and he gets a bit drunk, and he actually kind of opens up about himself. And it's a wonderful kind of paragraph about kind of being a reader in a way, because he spoke of his loneliness. This is a Lomax. He spoke of his loneliness of his childhood in Ohio, where his father had been a fairly successful small businessman. He told, as if another person, of the isolation that his deformity had forced upon him, of the early shame which had no source in that he could understand, no defense that he could muster. And when he told of the long days and evenings he had spent alone in his room, reading to escape the limitations that his twisted body imposed upon him, and finding gradually a sense of freedom that grew more intense as he came to understand the nature of that freedom, when he had told of this, William Stoner felt a kind of kinship that he had not suspected. He knew that Lomax had gone through a kind of conversion, an epiphany of knowing something through words that could not be put into words, as Stoner himself had once done in the class taught by Archer Sloane. Lomax had come to it early and alone, so that the knowledge was more nearly a part of himself than it was a part of Stoner. But in the way that was finally most important, the two men were alike, though neither of them might wish to admit it to the other, or even to himself. So it's like it's a kinship. It's a kinship of readers, of deep readers, people who it's like this is a part of me. This is something that come to me as either conversion, as a revelation, as a way of being. Which this is so far it's a book about a guy who's looks like he's gonna have had a tough life, miserable marriage, but it's like that kind of thing of that kind of getting in words something you can't actually put into words yourself, is something quite magical. Now the big thing in here is that Lomax takes his leave, and when he does, he goes and he kisses Edith. And it's a very kind of striking thing. He walked over to Edith, who was sitting erect on a straight chair, and took her hand. He thanked her for the party. Then, as if on a quiet impulse, he bent a little and touched his lips to hers. Edith's hand came up lightly to his hair, and they remained so for several moments while the others looked on. It was the chastest kiss Stoner had ever seen, and it seemed perfectly natural, which is like, I don't know if this seems perfectly natural to have your wife kind of kiss chastely or whatever wise for several moments another guy. Now, it's interestingly enough, after the party, the next day, Stoner's comes up to Lomax, and it's like, oh, hi, not hi, but it's like, with a bit of that familiarity that they had at the party, that intimacy, and Lomax has got nothing of it. He's completely cold. He's completely shut that down again. So it was like highly shielded kind of person in those moments. But I think the stuff that really gets me in this book is the reading. There's a bit in here where he talks about where Stnr talks about Stoner's like building his library. Like, he's got this new place, and he talks about the construction of where it is him making his library, his place, and this has got to be something that kind of resonates with people on BookTube. Page 100. As he worked on the room, it began to slowly take shape, as he worked on the room, and as it began slowly to take shape, he realized that for many years, unknown to himself, he had an image locked somewhere within him, like a shamed secret, an image that was ostensibly of a place, but which was actually of himself. So it was himself that he was attempting to define as he worked on his study, as he sanded the old boards for his bookcases and saw the surface roughness disappear, the gray weathering flake away to the essential wood, and finally to the rich purity of grain and texture, as he repaired his furniture and arranged it in his room. It was himself that he was slowly shaping. It was himself that he was putting into a kind of order. It was himself that he was making possible, which is like the most standing in my little man cave. That's making yourself possible by making this space for yourself is just beautiful, and it's interesting that Edith does not partake, will not even go into that room. It's like he and that room do not exist for her. This is her. She's bought this big house so she can be completely separate from him. But he does bring his daughter into her. Yeah, William still had the most care of their daughter. In the afternoons when he came home from the university, he took Grace from the upstairs bedroom that he converted into a nursery and let her play in the study while he worked. She played quietly and contentedly on the floor, satisfied to be alone. Every now and then William spoke to her, and she paused to look at him in solemn and slow delight, which is like there's the connection there between daughter and father in the space that makes him possible, which is I don't know if I'm holding on to these positives in Stoner's life, because there's definitely the negatives. So yeah, that is chapter 6 of Stnr by John Williams. Really enjoying it.